Thank you for listening to Shore Talk. This interview has been recorded and is available on WESR's YouTube page. To schedule a Shore Talk for your community event or organization, call us at 757-787-3200 or email Nancy at WESR.net.
We'll do decompression every day until we get the inflammation cycle settled down. So by his third day, we had knocked the pain down significantly with the spinal decompression and the laser. And we're about 2 weeks in now. We've probably done 6 or 7 treatments. And his pain level is almost nil. So a patient like that if we had not been doing laser, had not been doing spinal decompression before we got the decompression table, I would have patients that would suffer 6 or 7 weeks with severe nerve pain. And usually in instances like that, unless the disc material is actually out of the disc, that's called a prolapse disc, they're generally not surgery candidates. They're not, because of the risks of surgery going under anesthesia. Back surgery has about a 40% success rate. So because of the inherent health risks with having a major surgery like that and only a 40% success rate, a lot of times they'll just put these patients on medications and tell them, well, you gotta deal with it, you gotta ride it out. So we can take a patient that's in severe pain like that, and over a couple week period, knock out 70-80% of the pain, and then over a 2-month period, not only eliminate the pain, but permanently fix the structural cause. And that's the key of spinal decompression. So very interesting case, just really ties in with what we're going to be talking about today and what we talked about 2 weeks ago with the chronic inflammation. And another interesting patient came back in, hadn't seen him probably as a patient since about 2015. And when he came in initially, he had issues with his low back. We got that corrected in 2014 or 2015. And we also did laser for his peripheral neuropathy. Now we got his neuropathy settled down, and he came back in last week, had an emergency. He had, it's called the thoracolumbar transitional area, but it's the transition of the spine between the lumbar curve and the thoracic curve, and the motion in that area is critical for the health of the neck and the health of the low back. So that thoracolumbar transitional area was totally locked up, having severe pain. He couldn't sit because of the pain. He couldn't stand because of the pain. He couldn't lay down because of the pain. So he came in and we were talking, and he said, I've done pretty good since y'all treated me in 2015, but 2018 has been just a terrible year for any of my issues, my low back, my ankle, my neuropathy, my neck pain, all my joints. And he said, I really don't understand why that is. And I said, well, it all goes back to the setting up of the chronic inflammation. I said, if you had, once we got you fixed, if you had come in once a month and just gotten a tune-up, kept the spine mobile, had stopped the initiation of that chronic inflammation, then you wouldn't have had the avalanche that started in 2018. So, and that's, what I try to teach all my patients. I have some patients that will only come in and see us when they have a crisis, and we help them during that time, but we're not helping them eliminate the chronic inflammation, and eliminating that chronic inflammation is what really gives people quality of life in their retirement years. If you get adjusted once a month, you will not have to take much medication. Your body will function as God designed it. God designed our body to heal itself in the absence of nervous system interference. And if you have misalignments in the spine, you have nervous system interference, you develop chronic inflammation, and you will have aches and pains, and you'll be taking a lot of medication. And it will greatly affect, and a lot of people, it greatly affects their quality of life.
And disc degeneration, you said, people that have degenerative disc disease, that stops it.
Absolutely.
The adjustments will stop it.
Absolutely, because you're restoring motion. You're restoring, I've talked about, in previous shows that inhibition process, and we're going to touch on that today. But that's what keeps your discs healthy. So my patients that get adjusted once a month, generally, for the most part, have no issues. So that really tied in significantly with what had happened to his overall health collapse in the year 2018. So I explained that to him, and that really ties in with what I try to teach all of our patients. Get adjusted once a month. Be proactive on your maintenance of your nervous system and the alignment of the spine, and it really eliminates a lot of chronic degenerative issues, chronic inflammatory issues, and you won't have trouble. Another interesting patient over the past few weeks, lady in her retirement years having severe pain in the neck radiating down her arms, was scheduled for carpal tunnel surgery and started doing decompression on her neck, doing some laser on her neck, getting the pain in the neck, got that settled down. But it is also affecting the pain in her hands and her wrist. And it was bad enough that it was to the point where she couldn't grip anymore, couldn't flex her hand. And she had been diagnosed with bilateral carpal tunnel, but she wasn't aware that success rate on carpal tunnel surgery is only 35%. Now, they get paid 100% of the time, Charlie, but the surgery is only effective 35% of the time, because 65% of the time the cause is in the neck, symptoms show up in the wrist. And she has some pain in the hands and some pain at the wrist, but the pain also refers up her arms. So started doing some massage procedures on her forearms, getting motion back in the wrist. So I'm hoping if we should be at least able to eliminate carpal tunnel surgery in one wrist, if not both wrists, but at least one of the wrists. So some interesting patients over the past few weeks, and now I'm going to go ahead and jump into spinal decompression, but I wanted to touch, just say a couple sentences about our show from Tuesday before last, talking about health of the disc and how health of the disc is not only affected by mechanical pressure, mechanical insults, and physical trauma, but health of the disc is also, and all this is brand new research, health of the disc is also greatly affected by nutrition, what we eat on a daily basis. Carbohydrates, simple carbohydrates, bread, pasta, and rice, foods that your body breaks down quickly, and also sugar. Those products set up chronic inflammation. Now, just a note on this to Granny, Janet's mom listens to our show in South Carolina, and Granny makes the best pound cake, and she usually makes brownies for us. Granny, this is a note to you that when we come down, the pound cake and the brownies are okay, because it's only on occasion.
You have to have a treat every now and again.
Absolutely. Yes. The body can handle anything in moderation. So around the holidays, Granny's pound cake and Granny's brownies are muchly appreciated, and we don't.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Don't stop.
Please don't stop. So our listeners,
write down the recipe too.
I think she gave it to me.
Okay.
I would hate to go up against her on a pound cake.
Absolutely. So, anything in moderation. If you want to have some sweets, 1 or 2 days a week, you want to have some simple carbohydrates 1 or 2 days a week, it's not going to cause problems. It's when it becomes daily. And this is what I tell my patients. If your body can handle anything in moderation, if you had 1 cigarette a day or 5 cigarettes a week, your body can handle that. But when it becomes a half a pack a day, same thing. If you ate candy every day, multiple meals, then it's going to cause a problem. So some of these foods that we talked about, the simple carbohydrates and the sugar, when you have those on a daily basis, that's what sets up that chronic inflammatory process. And that chronic inflammatory process on a daily basis affects the health of the disc. This disc has no blood supply, but it's that imbibition process, forcing of nutrients and fluids via what they call the vertebral end plate. The vertebral end plate, the end plate of the vertebral bone where the disc contacts, has a high vascular blood supply, so the disc gets all of its nutrients from that vertebral end plate. So when you start to you have a poor diet like that, it affects nutrients getting to that disc. It affects the health of the nucleus pulposus, the internal parts of the disc. And the internal parts of the disc, that nucleus pulposus becomes very acidic, and it starts to eat out the disc from the inside out, and that's where disc bulges and disc herniations actually come from, is from the chemical insult, the changes in the chemical process, and the body's natural breakdown system of the body. The inflammatory process, it makes it where the body can't turn off that breakdown process, and it affects the internal health of the disc. So that's really the chemical process associated with long-term disc degeneration. And we also have the mechanical or the trauma aspects: football, dirt bikes, car accidents, jumping out of the back of pickups, jumping out of trees, jumping off of roofs, all the things that we did when we were teens and early 20s when we thought we were indestructible. Affects motion of the spine, which over a 30-year period affects health of the disc. So we've talked about the degenerative processes that affect health of the disc. So now let's talk about how we address spinal decompression, how we address the health of the disc, how we restore motion, how we restore overall health of the disc. And that's where spinal decompression comes in. Now, spinal decompression is a therapy that we use in our office, safe, effective treatment designed to help relieve nagging back, so low back, neck, or referred pain such as sciatica. Clinical studies of non-surgical spinal decompression therapy are reported that, and I think some of the statistics, as high as 85% of patients show significant reduction of pain. And I think actually our stats are higher, Janet, because we also not only incorporate the decompression table, but when the patient is acute and in severe pain, utilizing our class 4 laser.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 6 minutes of laser combined with the spinal decompression over a week or two period. That's how we knock out 70 or 80% of that pain in just a couple weeks. So pretty amazing therapy. Effective treatment for pain without risks associated with surgery. And some of those surgery risks, anesthesia, infection, injections, prescription medication. So, and we all know the opioid crisis now with people with chronic back pain. Oxycontin, oxycodone, you get hooked on those, they take your medication, and then now you're hooked on heroin. So big problems with prescription medication. But this brings to mind, we had a patient that had issues with his low back, and he would only come in and see us when he had a crisis. So he had a flare-up with his low back, decided to go the surgery route, and went the surgery route. I think they went in and trimmed a couple discs, and he ended up getting an infection. And this is things they don't tell you when they have you sign the release form if you die during the anesthesia process. But they don't tell you that there's a high incidence of infections. When you have very invasive surgery like that, when you have to go through layers of muscle, they get in there and grind with the medical Dremel and they trim the disc. You have a high infection rate. So he had an infection. It was about a 15-month ordeal. They had to go back in, deal with the infection. And if the infection gets in the bone, infection in soft tissue is one thing. You have to be on some pretty strong antibiotics, and it is it definitely affects your quality of life. But if the infection goes in the bone, a high percentage of these people die from the bone infection. So that's not a good thing. But anyway, he got an infection. He was on multiple antibiotics. Had a actual they had to go back in and put a drain out of his low back. So think of trying to function with a tube coming out of your low back, and then they actually don't suture it. They leave it open, and you have to change this packing every day in your low back. And all of that could have been eliminated by him just coming in once a month, whether he was symptomatic or not. Getting that once a month tune-up would have prevented that type of invasive. So he ended up having 2 surgeries, going through about 15 or 16 months of issues because of the repercussions and the problems from having surgery, from getting the infection. And he will always have issues in his low back because of that surgery. So,
well, one thing, just to jump in real quick, a family member of ours, her uncle was having some issues, and Ed looked at his MRI, and he's like, "You just need decompression." But the surgeon told him, "You come in pain and numbness, you walk out without it." So it's like it made it sound like it was a quick fix.
Right.
And it's like Ed told him. He said, "Okay, well, what the surgeon didn't tell you is you're going to have that one surgery, and then guess what? You're going to have another, and you're going to have another. So when you go back, you ask that surgeon that."
Absolutely.
And he did. And the surgeon told him, "You're right. Yeah. You will have multiple surgeries."
Absolutely.
And he still has issues.
Oh, yeah.
He still has numbness and stuff.
Usually when you get your first spinal surgery, usually within about 5 years, you're in for your next. And
right.
Then you're in for the next.
And all he needed was spinal decompression. His MRI looked no different than my MRI. It wasn't as bad as mine, I don't think.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've had no injections, no surgery. I did spinal decompression, chiropractic.
Right. Makes a huge difference. Right. So, computerized traction table. Usually our average treatment time is 17 to 20 minutes. And what the computerized traction table does is it takes the vertebral segment that has not had good motion in it. Say, for example, with your low back, you have 5 vertebral segments in your low back, and lack of proper motion of those segments over a 30 to 35 year period affects the health of the disc, as well as the chronic inflammatory process that ties in with improper diet, poor nutrition. But that affects motion of that disc. That affects that chronic inflammatory phase. So what this decompression table, computerized traction table does is it restores motion. It mechanically opens up the disc space. It puts a negative pressure in the disc, and if you have a disc bulge, it will draw that disc bulge back into the disc. And over a 2-month period, that bulge, that weakness of that disc will heal. So we can take patients that have a permanent herniation and over a 2-month period, heal that disc bulge. We get, on average, restoration of 40 to 50% of lost disc height back permanently over a 2-month period with that decompression table. So it's a computerized mechanical traction, and we can take a patient that comes in with pain in their low back or pain going down their leg or pain radiating down their arm, put them on the decompression table, and within 5 to 6 minutes after getting on the decompression table, the pain stops. It's almost immediate. So the process doesn't hurt. It's actually a relief. Decompressing that nerve, taking that mechanical pressure off of the nerve, stopping that chronic inflammation cycle is almost instant pain relief. So it feels good. It's a mechanical traction, opens up that disc space, restores that imbibition process, that process of putting nutrients, oxygen back into the disc so that the disc can heal, puts a negative pressure in the disc, draws the disc material back into the disc. So usually we do, 2 pulls a week, 2 treatment sessions a week, 17 to 20 minutes. And of course, Janet will stretch the patient. If they're acute, they're in severe pain, we'll use the laser. and then give them a good instrument or manual adjustment. And in 1 to 2 weeks, we usually knock down 60 to 70% of the symptoms, and then over a 2-month period, get rid of the rest of the symptoms and permanently heal that disc, so in their retirement years they have that quality of life. So what things is spinal decompression, what type of degenerative conditions is spinal decompression therapy effective for? Herniated disc, bulging discs, degenerative disc disease, facet syndrome, those articulating surfaces of the cervical and lumbar spine, they're called lumbar facets. And when that disc degenerates, when that disc thins, you have less space between the bones, starts to irritate those spinal nerves, also irritates the lumbar and cervical facets. So it opens up the disc space. It gives the space that those articulations move on. Instead of have bone grinding on bone, you have a padded area in between those bones. So it helps with facet syndrome. And people with facet syndrome, they complain of chronic daily low back pain, but they will all say that my low back pain is worse first thing in the morning. And a lot of those people with facet syndrome are also stomach sleepers. Sleeping on your stomach aggravates those lumbar facets. Also patients with sciatica, post-surgical patients. We do put patients on decompression therapy that have had surgery, and we already touched on that. If you have spinal surgery, a lot of times they're only going in to clean up the osteophyte formation or the excess calcium formation or the arthritic bone formation because of that loss of motion for 35 years. So they go in and they clean that up, or they go in and they trim the disc, but they do not restore that motion. They do not restore any disc height. So patients that have already had surgery will continue to have back pains.
That's what I was getting ready to say. You know, you go in, and if you have a disc bulge and they're trimming it, you still have no disc space. Like
Absolutely.
with the spinal decompression, and you're separating those discs, that material's going back in there.
Absolutely.
So that's going to help get that height back. And two, it's going to make it healthier.
Absolutely.
Say they trim it, it's still unhealthy.
Right. So not only are we addressing the symptoms, the pain, we are addressing the structural cause, and that's one of the big differences between surgery and spinal decompression. So also spinal stenosis, narrowing of the spinal column, but most people don't realize the spinal column narrows because loss of normal disc height, loss of that imbibition process, loss of normal motion of those vertebral segments. Your immune system, your nervous system recognizes that, and it sends in extra bone. It sends in extra calcium to try to fuse that segment that's not moving properly and that's not functioning properly. And that's what spinal stenosis is. Spinal decompression is very effective for spinal stenosis.
When I was having, like, I could just be standing there talking to you, and all of a sudden it felt like I had a stabbing pain in my back, and it would go down my legs, and my legs would really go limp. Now, was that the spinal stenosis? Was that the facet syndrome?
That was spinal stenosis.
And see, I don't have that.
Right.
That was gone within weeks. That really,
Absolutely.
and after the first couple of weeks, I still had some back pain.
Right.
Some, but my job was so physical.
Right.
I was doing all the rehab.
So that spinal stenosis is very abrasive. That narrowing of the spinal column, very abrasive to that spinal cord, and that's what gives you that instantaneous stabbing pain on certain movements. So what I'd like to do now is going to have Janet just read over and discuss some frequently asked questions. People call us, or when they come in and with their back issues, they have questions that they generally have or generally ask us about spinal decompression. So we're going to cover some of those.
And some of this he is already gone over as far as, what is spinal decompression therapy. So we've basically kind of gone over all that, where we've isolated and placed under negative pressure, causing a vacuum effect with the disc. So it draws that disc material back in.
Yep.
So that's one thing. So then, of course, people, may ask, what is the vacuum effect? Because we give them this brochure. So
Sure.
they still have some questions. The vacuum effect accomplishes two things. From a mechanical standpoint, the disc material that has protruded or herniated outside the normal confines of the disc can be pulled back within the disc by the vacuum created within the disc. So what that does within the disc stimulates growth of blood supply. Secondarily, it's stimulating a healing response. This results in pain reduction and proper healing at the injured site. So that's just kind of going over a little bit what we had done
Rehashing.
before.
Yep.
And we went over kind of what it's used for. The benefits is designed to unload the spinal disc. Any back pain or neck pain caused in whole or in part by a damaged disc may be helped by spinal decompression therapy, which include herniated, protruding, bulging, spinal stenosis, sciatica, or radiculopathy, which is like pinched nerves. Sometimes
Referred
we have
pain.
people call us, I think I have a pinched nerve in my back or a pinched nerve in my
Yes,
in
absolutely.
my neck. Really, the only time that spinal decompression is not recommended if you're pregnant. If you have hardware, there are some times that we might not, or we just really alter it.
I will alter the treatment plan. And hardware, for our listeners, sometimes they'll put a cage in. Sometimes they'll fuse two vertebrae together. You take a segment that God designed to move and you immobilize it. The areas above it and below it will start to have problems. But if they put screws or hardware, we will alter the treatment plan. I will do a lumbar or cervical pull at less weight if you've got hardware in there, but you still respond positively. You'll still respond. We just have to alter that type of treatment plan. If the patient's pregnant, of course, we won't do decompression. Also, if you've had a scoliosis and you've got a Harrington rod in your spine, it's where they screw a steel rod to every vertebrae. Then, of course, we can't do spinal decompression in the area where the Harrington rod is.
Yeah, so there are very few issues that you cannot do decompression. Now,
Very
after
few.
if you've gone through a couple failed back surgeries, if your spine is just unstable,
Right.
and
That's very few.
yeah, that's very few. We wouldn't recommend it at that point. But in that case, we still have chiropractic, and we have
Still have
we
the
have
laser.
we have the laser.
Absolutely.
And as far as results, 70-80% of the people get good pain relief. My pain was gone within a couple of weeks, but even within those first weeks, it wasn't constant.
Right.
Before it was constant. With my job being so physical, I'm lifting 45-pound weight plates, turning and putting them on a
Loading machines.
on a machine or something. So my job was a little harder on my body than
A little different than the average.
right.
Person's
But
job.
you drink your water to hydrate those discs. Those discs are 80% water. You drink your water. You do what we ask you to do. Get out and you walk.
Change your diet.
Um,
Get out of that inflammatory.
right.
Chronic
But we'll
inflammatory
have you in
phase.
the office. Typically 2 times a week.
Mhm.
Sessions 15 to 20 minutes. So by the time you do your decompression, we do stretching, adjustment, laser. Usually within an hour,
Mhm.
you're done with that.
Yeah, so pretty simple, long-term fix for neck and low back problems.
Right. And we try to make it cost effective. So many people, they go through surgeries and then they have, physical therapy. And there is some out of pocket
Absolutely.
with that. So really, I think in the long run, there's such a minimal charge
Mm-hmm.
that we charge for our spinal decompression.
Absolutely. What's your quality of life worth? That's what it comes down to.
Exactly. What is your quality of life worth?
So we had a good talk today about spinal decompression. If anybody's got any questions for us, Janet, if you'll give out our contact info.
Telephone 331-1190. Email BaysideChiropracticofCC@gmail.com. And also check us out on Facebook at Bayside Chiropractic Rehab and Laser, and of course, Cape Charles, Virginia.
Very good. Thank you.
Welcome to Shore Talk. Shore Talk is designed to keep you better informed of what's going on here on Virginia's beautiful Eastern Shore. Now, here's Shore Talk